Dun da da da! It's time for Chapter 19. The battle begins. Okay, it's really not that exciting. Well, no, it's very exciting. It's exciting. There's no guts, which is a positive thing, in my opinion. In Chapter 18, we had just seen, or they were talking to Kazal about Cimmerian and the sword and Interil and what happened 17 years ago, and remember that the wizards had tried to steal large chunks of the Enchanted Forest magic, and they stole the sword from the King of the Enchanted Forest, which allowed them to do that. The absence of the sword allowed them to steal the magic, and so then Cimmerian went and stole it back, and then there was a big war, and the dragons were on the side of the Enchanted Forest, and somewhere in all of that, the king was disposed of, but he's not dead. He's trapped inside the castle somehow, and by this magical bubble that the wizards put up, and then the dragons put up a similar bubble outside, and it's impenetrable, so nobody can get in or out, and that's how things stand so far. And Kazal just said, Shiera may help us if she wishes, but you, Daystar, will be going into the castle to break whatever spell the wizards put on the king 17 years ago. So here's where Chapter 19 begins. That took some explanation. What Kazal meant was, the dragons would lower the barrier they had put up around the castle. Then, I would draw the sword of the sleeping king and put it into the wizard's barrier, which, according to Kazal, would bring it down. The wizards would know immediately that something was happening, and they would start trying to get to the castle. The dragons and their various allies would hold off the wizards and whomever they brought to help them, while I ran into the castle, found the king, and broke the spell. By the way, that is a correct use of the word whomever. Lots of people don't use it correctly. So I appreciate that. Good job, Patricia Reed. Okay. I didn't like the sound of it at all, but I couldn't say much. After all, Mother had given me the sword, and I was pretty sure this was what she'd wanted me to do with it. Besides, Kazal seemed to think I was the only one who could use the sword to break the spell. And how do you tell the king of the dragons that you won't do something she wants you to do? You can't, really, I think. Shiera, on the other hand, had a lot to say. She thought it would be stupid for me to go into the castle by myself. Kazal asked if she was volunteering, and Shiera said that she wasn't going to be left out just when things were getting interesting. Kazal pointed out that Shiera's arm was broken, and Shiera told her that being inside the castle with me sounded safer than being outside with a lot of wizards and dragons fighting. Finally, Kazal said Shiera could go with me if she wanted to. Shiera said good, and were the dragons going to be able to keep all the wizards out of the castle, or were some of them going to sneak in after us? They kept on like that for a while. I was very glad when a middle-sized dragon arrived with dinner and interrupted. I couldn't see why Kazal was being so patient with Shiera, and I was getting worried that her patience wouldn't last much longer. Dinner was excellent. Kazal spent most of the meal lying on the floor and watching us inscrutably. Dragons are very good at being inscrutable. That is a fantastic word. Inscrutable. Say it with me. Inscrutable. So it means like you can't tell what they're thinking. I found it a bit unsettling, but it didn't seem to bother Shiera or Night Witch. After dinner, we talked some more. Kazal told us about the castle and what the floor plan was. Floor plan is like where all the rooms are and stuff. She also told us about a lot of things to watch out for. Most of them were magical items that would be dangerous only if we accidentally did something to them. But there were a few traps, too. This castle sounds awfully big, Shiera said after a while. How are we supposed to find this king, anyway? You look for him, Kazal said. I'm afraid I can't tell you exactly where. The only people who knew where the king was were the wizards who went in and put the spell on him, and as far as I know, they're all dead. As far as you know? I asked. Some of them didn't come out of the castle. But you're sure the ones who did come out are dead? Positive. Kazal smiled reminiscently and licked her lips. I think she ate the wizards. So what? Said Shiera. Kazal and I looked at her. I don't care about the wizards who came out, she went on defensively. I'm worried about the ones who might still be in there. They have to be either dead or enchanted, Kazal said. Even a wizard can't live 17 years without food. Shiera relaxed a little. I suppose not. All right then, what does this king look like? You'll know him when you see him. Besides, he's the only other person in there. Oh, great. Shiera wrinkled her nose disgustedly. We have to hunt through an empty castle for someone who we don't even know, while a bunch of wizards try to get in and stop us. It shouldn't be that bad, Kazal said. The sword and the key should both help considerably. The key, I said. Of course the key, Kazal said impatiently. It can open any door in the castle. That's what it was made for. You could have managed with the sword alone, but it will be much faster with the key as well. Are you saying I just picked up the key to the castle by accident? Accidents like that happen all the time in the Caves of Chance, Kazal said dryly. Why do you think they got their name? Chance is another way to say, like, luck or fortune. How do you know it's the right key? Shiera demanded. The Quazzle said some wizard put it there. Kazal shrugged. That's what makes it likely it's the key to the castle, and that's capitalized, key to the castle. We caught one of the wizards coming out of the caves near the end of the battle, and he'd been inside the castle more than long enough to take the key. But if it will make you feel more comfortable, I can look at it. I dug the key out of my pocket and held it out to Kazal. Kazal glanced at it and started to nod, then stopped suddenly and stared at the key very intently. It's the key to the castle, all right, but the wizard's done something to it. She sounded outraged. Wonderful, said Shiera disgustedly. All we need is another wizard to get mixed up in this. He isn't another wizard, Kazal said. He's the same one who stole the sword in the first place, and he's dead. You're sure he's not one of the wizards who didn't come out of the castle? Shiera asked. I ate him myself. Oh, Shiera frowned. Can you tell what he did? Kazal didn't answer. She stared at the key instead, and her eyes started glowing. The key began getting warmer and warmer in my hands. Just before it got too hot for me to hold, the key jerked in the direction of the castle outside. A second later, I dropped it. I stood shaking my fingers while Kazal and Shiera stared down at the key, and Night Witch walked over and sniffed at it. Night Witch, said Shiera, stop that. You'll get enchanted or something. She bent over and grabbed awkwardly for Night Witch with her left hand. The kitten jumped away, and Shiera's fingers brushed the key. A look of surprise came over her face, and she picked the key up. It feels like fire, she said. I know, I said. It burned my fingers. No, I don't mean it's hot, Shiera said. It just feels like fire. It shouldn't, Kazal said, sounding interested. Bring it over here. Shiera took the key to Kazal, who looked at it for a few minutes and handed it back. I thought so. It's part of what the wizard did. But what's it for? Shiera said. I don't know, Kazal admitted. The fire spell is connected to something inside the castle, but I can't tell what with the barriers around the outside. He may have set a trap with it. May I have my key back, please? I said. Kazal and Shiera both looked at me, and Shiera handed me the key. Thank you, I said, and put it in my pocket. I wasn't quite sure why I wanted it. I only knew that keeping it felt right somehow. Is there anything else we need to know? I asked. I mean, we've walked a long way today, and we've been in a cave-in, and Shiera has a broken arm, and if we're going to do all these things tomorrow, I would sort of like to get some rest. Meow, said Night Witch emphatically. Kazal chuckled. It seems you aren't the only one who would like rest. Very well. Marchak! The middle-sized dragon who had brought us dinner appeared, and Kazal had him show us to our rooms. They turned out to be normal human-sized rooms and quite comfortable. I was surprised until it occurred to me that the King of Dragons would probably have occasional human visitors who would need a place to stay. Then I wondered how many human magicians kept special places for visiting dragons in their castles and towers and things, and right in the middle of wondering, I fell asleep. A loud pounding noise woke me. Someone, probably a dragon, was knocking on the door of my room. Just a minute, please, I called, and the pounding stopped. I got out of bed, which I couldn't remember having gotten into, and picked up my sword belt. I checked my pockets to make sure I had the key, started for the door, and stopped suddenly in the middle of the room. If the dragons expected me to do things with the sword of the Sleeping King, I wasn't going to carry it under my arm like a bag of laundry. I put the sword belt on and opened the door. It's about time, said the little dragon in the hall. Shiera and Night Witch were already there. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't know you were in a hurry. The dragon snorted and started off down the hall. We went after it. It didn't seem to be in a particularly good mood. Shiera explained that it wanted to come into the castle with us, but Kazal wouldn't let it. I couldn't see why it wanted to come. There weren't supposed to be any wizards inside the castle, and I thought the little dragon wanted to fight wizards. I didn't say anything, though. Arguing with a grouchy dragon isn't safe, even if it's only a small dragon. The dragon brought us back to the cave where we'd talked to Kazal the previous night. Kazal wasn't there, but breakfast was, and we sat down right away. We were just finishing when Kazal arrived to take us out to the castle. Kazal led us out of the caves and across the hard brown ground. All around us, dragons were polishing their teeth and sharpening their claws, and some of them were muttering spells under their breath. A couple of times, I saw elves hurrying through the crowd, and once I saw a group of intense-looking, red-haired people who had to be fire witches. Everyone was very serious and grim. None of us said anything until we got to the castle. Kazal led us around the outside of the shimmerings until we were at the front of the castle. If I concentrated on looking through the barriers, I could see a flat wooden bridge across the moat and a large door with steps leading up to it. Kazal stopped and turned to the little dragon. "You'd better go find your place now," she said. "But I want to—" "Go!" The little dragon went. Shiera and I looked at each other and then at Kazal. Kazal smiled. "Are you ready?" I nodded jerkily. Shiera bent and picked up Night Witch. Kazal's smile widened. "When I say now, draw your sword and run for the castle. Don't look back and don't stop for anything." I nodded again because I didn't trust my voice just then. Kazal turned to the crowd of dragons, and suddenly everything was completely silent. A shiver ran down my back, and I put my hand on the hilt of the sword of the Sleeping King. I felt the bee in the jar buzz that was Shiera's magic, and a strong humming from all the dragons, but the strongest feeling of all was the purring I'd felt from the first time the sword made my arm tingle. It came from the castle. Not from the shimmerings around the castle. They just got in the way. What I was feeling was the magic of the castle itself. I took a tighter grip on the hilt of the sword. The tingling from the dragons got stronger and more positive, and abruptly Kazal turned and shouted, "Now!" As she spoke, the silver and green shimmering around the castle vanished. I yanked the sword of the Sleeping King out of its sheath and swung it at the golden glow that was still left between me and the castle. I felt an enormous shock as the sword hit, and then the shimmering vanished in an explosion of golden light. I shook my head and heard Kazal shout, "Run!" I took 2 steps and almost lost my balance. The ground wasn't hard and bare anymore. It was covered with slippery green fuzz. Shiera grabbed my arm just as I heard a series of explosions from behind us. We ran. I could feel the jangling from the sword that meant there were wizards around somewhere, but I didn't stop to look for them. I was too busy trying to keep up with Shiera, hang on to the sword, and dig the key out of my pocket, all at the same time. Shiera was standing in front of the door, panting, when I got up to it with the key. I didn't see a keyhole, but as soon as my foot touched the top step of the stairs, the door swung open. "Daystar," Shiera said, "are you sure—" Something hit the stone of the castle next to the door and exploded, showering us with little chips of rock. Shiera and I dove through the door and landed on the floor inside with Night Witch on top of us. I sat up just as the door closed silently behind us. "Hey," Shiera said, "watch what you're doing with that sword." "I'm sorry." I stood up, stuck the key in my pocket again, and held out a hand to help Shiera up. "Is your arm all right?" "I think so," she said absently. "At least, it doesn't hurt any more than it did already. Now, which way do we go?" "I don't know." The door shook as something hit it, and a moment later there was a muffled explosion. "I think we should get out of here, though." "Aren't you going to put that stupid sword away first?" "No," I said. "I'd rather have it in my hand, in case some of the wizards do get into the castle." Shiera scowled, but she didn't object again, and we started hunting. The castle was even more confusing on the inside than it was on the outside. Rooms opened into more rooms, and then suddenly into a hallway or a flight of stairs. All of them were full of chairs and tables and books and suits of armor, and everything was dusty. The wizard spell had kept spiderwebs and cobwebs out of the castle, but it hadn't done anything at all about the dust. Night Witch didn't like it at all. She kept sneezing until finally Shiera picked her up and carried her. It took a lot longer to figure out where we were going than I expected. I could feel the sword pulling me toward the center of the castle, but it was very hard to go just in that direction. In spite of Kazal's instructions, Shiera and I kept getting into hallways that curved the wrong way, and chains of rooms that ended with nowhere else to go. It was very discouraging. Finally, we came to a pleasant room with a big window and a desk in the corner. "This doesn't look right either," Shiera said. "Do you think—" "Doesn't look right?" growled a voice up near the ceiling. "Of course it doesn't look right. It's been 17 years since anyone's dusted in here, and I haven't had any visitors except the mice." I looked up and saw a wooden gargoyle in one corner. It made a face at me and went on, "Who are you, and what are you doing in here?" "I'm Daystar, and I'm looking for the king of the enchanted forest," I said. "Oh, yeah? What for?" the gargoyle demanded suspiciously. "I think I'm supposed to return his sword." "Oh, I see. Well, he isn't here. Hasn't been for 17 years, and boy, am I gonna give him an earful when he gets back." "Come on, Daystar, we're wasting time," said Shiera. "Try the great hall, down the corridor to your left," the gargoyle yelled after us as we left the room. "And send somebody to wipe the dust out of my ears. The things I put up with." Since nothing else had worked, we followed the gargoyle's directions and found ourselves in front of a large door at the end of a long hall. It was 3 times as wide as a normal door and much taller, and it was made of gold with designs in relief. That means like pictures, like shallow, like a statue, but only half the statue, because it's like a... Anyway, ask me later if you're interested. There was a staff lying on the floor in front of it, and I could tell from the jangling of the sword that it was a wizard's staff. When I stopped to look at it, the sword jerked impatiently toward the door. "I think this is the place we're looking for," I said. Shiera tried the door. "It's locked. Where's the key?" "Just a minute." I dug for it. As soon as I touched it, I felt the key pulling at me, the same way the sword was. "Hey!" "What is it?" Shiera said. "Come on, hurry up." "It's this key," I said as I unlocked the door. "It feels almost like the sword, except—" I stopped as the door swung open. The room inside was very large and very high, full of light and not dusty at all. In the center of the floor stood something like a shallow iron brazier. Brazier. I'm actually not sure how you say that word. Brazier, I think. About 3 feet tall and nearly 5 feet across, full of glowing coals. On the other side of the brazier, which is it's like a stove, sort of like if you have a wood stove in your house that's freestanding, it's not like your cooking stove. It's like shaped like a pot, and it'll usually have a chimney going out instead of a fireplace. Anyway, that's sort of what it is. It was about 3 feet tall and nearly 5 feet across, full of glowing coals. On the other side of the brazier was a couch, and lying on the couch was a man. He was dressed in expensive-looking clothes, but there were tears in them, as if he had been fighting. Or in a fight, sorry. He didn't look old, even though his beard was long and gray. His head was bare, and at his side was a jeweled scabbard, empty. He was asleep. Shiera took a deep breath. "That must be him. Come on, Daystar, let's get this over with." I stepped into the room and walked slowly toward the couch. This is too easy, I thought. As I came around the brazier, I saw that there was another wizard staff lying beside the couch. Something felt wrong, and I slowed down even more. I stopped, standing next to the couch with the key in one hand and the sword in the other. "Well, now that we're here, how do we break the spell?" Shiera asked, coming up on one side of me. "Something's wrong," I said, and as I spoke, I realized what it was. The key was still pulling at me, but as soon as I stepped into the room, the pulling from the sword had stopped. All I could feel from the sword was the jangling of the magic in the wizard staffs. "Maybe if you lay the sword on him, it'll work," Shiera said, ignoring me. "You have to try something, or we'll be here all day." "I wouldn't try anything at all if I were you," said a voice behind us. Shiera and I spun around. The doorway was full of wizards. And that is the end of chapter 19. Cliffhanger, if I ever saw one. Chapter 20 is next, in which Daystar uses his sword. So we finally get to see some exciting magic from this sword, hopefully. Yeah. And then we have chapter 21, and then we have chapter 22, and then it's the end. So we only have 3 more weeks, y'all, of reading, and then it will be over. So maybe for the rest of the school year, well, I'll give you some things to vote on. Maybe we'll start a new book that will continue into the summer. Or maybe we'll give Miss Tucker a little break so she can have her Monday nights back. I don't know. Okay, so anyways, tune in next time for chapter 20. And thanks for joining me today, and hope you enjoy it. And I'll look up how to say that word for next time. It's brazier. And I've never had to say it out loud before. I've only ever seen it in this book. Anywho, I'll see you next time. Bye.